to the Blueprint Sales Workshop. Hope y'all are having an amazing day. We are here. We have some technical difficulties, but we are here, y'all. So real quick before we go into this, let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know what's going on. Also, as well, let us know your role, where you're tuning in from, and also what your role is before we dive into it. We will go right into this, get tactical. And if you do have any questions, by the way, feel free to put them in the Q&A. You can put them in the chat, but Q&A is a lot easier. It allows us to dive in. But again, for everybody tuning in, let us know you're tuning in from, let us know where you're at, and then let us know your role. And then we're going to dive into the blueprint and really help you all on your strategies, your frameworks, and systems in order to be better leaders. So before we do that, I have Dave here. I have John here. If y'all want to quickly introduce yourselves, then we'll get into it.
Cool, we'll follow the order. So pleasure to meet everyone. So my name's John. I run the global sales team here at Cognism. Quick story. So I've been at Cognism roughly 5 years. Started as an SDR, was an AE, now managing our global sales team. So excited to discuss our blueprint with everyone today. And pass to Dave.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Dave. I'm the VP of Global Sales Development. So I run Cognism's sales development function, both inbound and outbound. I started here 4.5 years ago. So I joined just pre-Series A after John had done all the hard work to get us to Series A. We've taken off since then. It's really good to be on.
Awesome. Well, again, appreciate everybody chiming in. We got the head of marketing, we have senior business development managers, business directors, and if you're a leader today, this is what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to talk about why is the blueprint important, how's Cognism used in an actual approach across the board for every single topic here. So we're going to go over hiring, ramping, high impact coaching, outbound strategy, forecasting, and commission plans. But for everybody listening in, obviously, one of these topics is probably the most important. If you had to point to a topic that you're the most excited to learn today or has been a struggle in your business, let us know in the chat. Is it, hiring ramping is not really going the way I want it to? Let us know in the chat. Or, hey, look, forecasting, I don't really know exactly how to go about that right now due to everything in the market. Put that in the chat as well. Our goal here today is to give you the actual insights on what to do, but it's the best when we have context on where you are struggling or why you're showing up here today and taking the time to learn from us. So let us know in the chat out of these 5, right? High and ramping, high impact coaching, outbound forecasting, and commission plans. Let us know. We're going to make sure to dive into that, and feel free to ask questions as we dive into it. So, none of these things don't matter unless you hire appropriately and you ramp appropriately. So we obviously looking at from the SDR side and the AE side, and we will make sure our hiring process is good. So Dave, you've hired a ton of SDRs, and tell us, what exactly do you look for when you're doing your hiring?
Yeah, really great question. So I think for SDR specifically, I think for me, experience doesn't mean too much. I'm a really big believer that if we set up the right enablement internally, we can get as long as someone has the right character, we can teach them the SDR skills required very quickly. And also, I think we all know SDRing is a really, really hard job. I don't think it's the kind of job that people do for years and years and years. And because of the energy that's required to it. So I really want to take advantage of kind of people that are new to sales, have that high energy already, and can use that to their advantage. So really, we're looking for, ordinarily we're looking at people that have just left education and moving industries, etc. Haven't done sales before, and the characteristics I'm looking for are number one, and probably the most important thing, is I want natural high achievers. So I'm looking for a history of high achievement, something that they've done in the past that shows that they've pushed things to the next level. I always give the example, you might have seen this before from me, but if you're the world champion Tiddlywinks player, or if maybe you I don't know, you pushed to be the president of a society at college or university, whatever it might be, you've gone from you haven't settled at being kind of average amongst the group. You've really pushed to go further, and I think that's something that's incredibly difficult to teach. And so that's one thing that I really like to see. A lot of I think everybody should, see the synergy between like athletes and salespeople. Morgan, I know you're a massive Kobe Bryant fan, so and I think that you can draw a lot from him and how amazing he was, like into sales. So that's thing number one, and then outside of that, I think there's two other, two other pieces. Number one, accountability. I'm a really, really massive believer that all great salespeople are accountable. It's this is more of a red flag moment, but like if I see someone that's coming from another company and they're very critical of that old company, you can kind of tell from the way that they talk about issues, that they aren't someone that self-analyzes and takes responsibility. So really looking for people that kind of want to take that accountability. And then the final thing is curiosity. Now, curiosity is super advantageous when for all salespeople in terms of understanding who, when you're speaking to prospects, showing genuine interest, learning about pains, etc. But also I kind of bucket curiosity into this drive for self-development. I find curious people really want to continue to learn. That's again, I think it helps keep SDRs motivated and moving forward. So those would be my three things: high achievement, curiosity, and like I say, accountability.
If we want to double tap on something you said, Dave, and then we'll go to John here. You talked about one of the things that could be not like a gentle flag, but red flag is like maybe if they have like not a lot of experiences in SDR, because it's the opposite of no experience is something that you don't look for. So a lot of experience could be one. You mentioned some other red flags as well. Could you talk about some other things that you look at that's like, whoa, that's a red flag. I would not hire this person, and why? I think that's important, just on top of what you look for as well.
Yeah. Great question. So just on the experience piece, I think generally speaking, most top performing SDRs at organizations will move into other roles. Right. There are exceptions to the rules always, but generally speaking, like our top SDR performers will move into account executives, they move into account management roles, customer success roles, SDR management roles. Right. So if you've got lots and lots and lots of experience in an SDR role, sometimes, unless you found this unicorn that is someone that is just obsessed with SDRing and wants to stay in SDRing forever, but I really, I've been in this industry for a while now, and I've not met one of them. Morgan, I'm sure that you've met a handful at best that are just absolutely obsessed with that.
Yep.
That's why I tend to avoid them, because it usually implies they've kind of like average performers. I suppose like on that note as well, if someone, again, it's a massive cliche, but if people have moved on from jobs at the 3-month, 6-month mark, or even less than a year on like repeated occasions,
yep.
Then I'm very wary of that. But I'd also extend that to things like, people that have been college dropouts, or I'm trying to think, what else, just generally when you're discovering their story, if they're the sort of people that kind of like duck at the first issue. That is a big concern for me, right? Like, we know sales is hard. There's going to be those moments where things don't go your way, and like you need to just stick through them, right? Like there's I doubt anybody, again, like, be a unicorn situation if you found a salesperson that didn't have a story about like when things were really tough and you had to just kind of fight through them. Certainly I've got one of those stories where my manager, I was going on holiday for 2 weeks from Australia to the UK, where I lived, and my manager before I went said, look, like, go on your holiday, but when you come back, like, I need you to make a decision. Like, I don't think you're suited for this role. And then I came back and I stuck with it, and really it was very positive and worked itself out of that. But like, I could have easily just gone back to the UK, stay in the UK. So I think those those are the things that spring to mind immediately. I'm sure that there's so many others, but right now those are the two things that spring to mind.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I believe that's important. Okay, so now you hire the SDR, they do well. To your point, I've only literally met like 13, 14 people that are life for SDRs, and they just love it. But that's so it's so rare that you find, like it's so rare, and those are just gems, right?
And
like,
those,
okay, keep doing your thing.
Like I can think of two, and like one became a consultant, right, and did it for multiple companies because they loved it so much, but gave themselves that lifestyle and made it into a business, right? And then, I think. Yeah, if you're that obsessed with SDRing, I think you probably take a path like me. I'm obsessed with that SDRing, but like, I've chosen to try and lead a group now, right? So
exactly,
again, like, I think it's rare.
So John, let's go to you. We now have these account executives. So this is a two-parter question, because you can find the ideal AE candidate within your organization, or you can make the decision to hire outside of the organization. So how are you making these decisions as you scale the team to hire internally, or, well, we need to get more people externally? I know this probably have to do with segmentations, enterprise and market, but I'm curious on how you look at this.
Yeah, so we made a very hard rule in the organization that we always want to, I think it's much easier to get high performing talent much earlier on in the SDR world than it is to get high performing talent in the AE world from an external standpoint. Like, as Dave alluded to, like, the best salespeople are earning good money, and particularly at an AE level, like, if you've got a pipeline of 12 months, like, it's going to be very, very difficult to walk away from that pipeline. So our philosophy's always been internal first. So I think it's really, really good to systemize it and quantify it, work out that criteria that you deem to be a successful AE, and you'll probably have a very good indication from the rep if they're internal on their performance, their work ethic and stuff like this. Some key traits I'm sure we'll touch on in a minute, but really have like a benchmark in terms of what the minimum is to go through. And if they don't meet that minimum, absolutely, and you need to grow the organization scale and look external. But I think it's really important to quantify, and don't base it on gut. Like, really break out that, whatever your interview process is, we get them to do like a discovery call and then a follow-up, and then we score that. And for us, like, we've scaled, I think it's around 85% of our teams come from internal hires into our account executive team, and we've only really had like one or two that have kind of not met the mark. So I think when you set that foundation and that minimum, if it works, it works. Just keep repeating that. External is a little bit different, right? Like, that's that, and the most successful external candidates I've seen have always been referral led, like, give or take. But there are key attributes that stand out for these external ones, and you do need to be a little bit more rigorous in your approach when you do the interview comparative to an internal. Yeah, that's kind of how we scaled the organization today.
One question here, and then we'll go back to Dave, the 3069, and then we'll talk about yours as well. You mentioned that you scored the discovery call. How did you score that discovery call? Some people in here probably are wondering, okay, like, yeah, I'm hiring AEs right now. Like, how are you scoring that?
Yeah, so introduction, agenda setting, then we go into the actual discovery itself. And some of the core attributes we look in there is like the ability to do active listening. So if I give you a nugget of gold in a particular sentence, that could frame your whole discovery. So are they actually picking up on stuff like that? And then are they digging into the pain that's associated to that? Like, what's the implication of that particular pain that particular persona is feeling? Going into the actual demo, and this is the art of it as well. Sometimes, like, when we do the interviews, like, we're not looking them to actually demonstrate the product. All we're doing for them to look to do is like really work out what a good next step is. And that good next step might be to get an introduction to someone lower down in the organization. It might be to get an introduction to someone higher up. So it's understanding the context of who you're speaking to, getting the information that you need, and then cementing hard next steps on the back of that. But yeah, like, I think key things that I would look for if I was going to hire an AE, like inquisitive nature, are they coachable? Work ethic for me is a huge one. I think that you cannot train work ethic. And as an AE, if you're running 12-month sales cycles, you need to have someone who's driven and speedy responses, can do stuff concisely, that intelligence level. Yeah, that's some of the key ones I would look for.
Yeah, and that transitions into like this next piece here, which is, you talked about scenario-based interview questions, but Dave, going back to you, if you're looking for this 30, 60, 90, how are you making sure that once the SDRs in the organizations, they're being onboarded appropriately, so they're not like, all right, like, I'm looking somewhere else, or they're confused, right? And you have to go hire a new person, and you know how those labor costs work. Yeah,
for sure. I think like, so I've always been quite serious about my onboarding process. Number one, because obviously, like the shorter the onboarding time, the better it is for the business. But I think secondly, also, if we've got a really professional and slick onboarding process, it really sets the tone for the SDRs in terms of like their performance levels moving forward. You know, like they will kind of act, they'll almost mirror like exactly what we do, and if everything's really like ad hoc and scrappy, then perhaps that will reflect in their work. We for SDRs, we try and, I'm a really big believer on getting them on the phones as and doing the outreach as quickly as possible. So we have like 4 days worth of classroom training in their first week, and then on the 5th day, so usually that's a Friday, we'll get them on, we'll try and get them on the phones in the afternoon. We don't want to burn good fit accounts, so we actually give them accounts that are in kind of like just outside of our ICP. So generally we're targeting SDR teams are targeting mid-market and outbound, so we might give them, you know, SMB accounts that still kind of fit within generally who we're signing. So it's not completely useless, but it doesn't really matter if they get things wrong.
Right.
And then once we've gone through that, then we do 2 training sessions a week for the next 3 months, followed by like a test at the end of the 3 months to kind of identify any gaps that we might have seen in the onboarding. Here in the UK, we obviously have probation periods, and so as a UK headquartered company, we've kind of mirrored that like across all regions. Our probation periods are 6 months, so really kind of that 3-month mark is a time for us to assess any of the gaps, hopefully fix them over the following 3 months, and with ultimately the 6-month part being the moment where we say, look, is this is this going to be a mutual fit both ways? So that should give us enough time. And then obviously, we want to make it as interactive as possible. We do, we're big fans of Kahoot quizzes, which became very popular over lockdown. I think for people on a personal basis, but we use them for, we'll reinforce training with different Kahoot quizzes, like as we go through, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's generally how we're running it right now.
And then John, same to you. So what's the 30-60-90 look like? And then also as well, like what are you adding in to make sure people feel comfortable that they're prepared to sell?
Cool. Good question. I'm very in the same mindset as Dave in terms of just getting in the deep end. When we're hiring these sellers, like I think the way that we set up our account executive management structure, they're very hands-on with the reps during that initial period. So they come into that role. We have standard like a week of getting to understand the market and the product, lesson D courses and stuff like that they have to go through just to get basic understanding of the product. At the end of that, obviously they get a score. They need to pass a certain threshold to be able to go into the live demos. And I think the key thing is there's 2 elements, like that learning on the job where the manager's supporting them, giving them guidance, real-time guidance at the end of that, role plays that come on the back of it. But also as well, like if you've got high performers in the organization and you've got software, and I know we're going to talk about some software later that we utilize, like software like Gong and Jiminy, stuff like that, build out a catalog of what best in class looks like from your high performing reps, and that really breeds that consistency and high performance. If they start off very, very early and they don't build their own narrative on how to tackle certain objections, they know from day one, this is how I need to tackle that. This is how I tackle the competition. Pulled from live calls. That's a really good learning resource. But I wouldn't say it's as structured as what Dave's is. Like we have that week training. I think the complexity of an AE role is very different, right? Like it extends so much beyond. There's so many nuances that come on the back of it that you're not going to be able to train every single person on that. But that's really why we have the manager there to support and give that guidance.
And so that leads us to our next point, which is like high impact coaching. So for people that are doing coaching, let us know how you go about it in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to chime in as we're talking. And when you think about coaching, it's something that is on a continuous basis. Even done training myself, it's like, okay, training is a point in time, coaching is ongoing. So when you look at coaching, John, going back to you obviously said there's nuances, right, within the AE role. There's different skill sets. There's also the mindset of the rep, right? You probably got to play therapist from time to time. Dave probably knows all about this too, so we're going to talk about that. But what are you coaching to, right?
Yeah.
When you have your AEs, and do you have breakdowns? And what I mean by breakdowns is, okay, discovery, what's their prospecting skills, what's their X skills, and how are you coaching to that, and how are you coaching your leaders to be prepared for that as well?
That's a really cool question. So there's different elements of coaching that we have. So we do individual sessions where we review the calls and then we stick to that framework, right? So very similar. It's almost identical to what we do for when we do the AE interview. Like we break down the particular call. We'll have a scorecard for net new demo. We'll have a scorecard for negotiation. We'll have a scorecard for like a procurement negotiation call. And then the manager would go through that with the reps to make sure they're aligned and they're hitting the right questioning and like the right call to actions on the back of that. So absolutely that individual time, like mapped rep to manager and like really dissecting live calls. That's really where we spend a lot of our time. The other element of it is like group setting as well. So to make it, and this is one thing that I think is really, really important when you are scaling, is that teamwork element of like we're in this together, and we're all going to succeed if everyone else is performing. So we do have like group sessions weekly where we dissect a call. It's not a exercise where people feel scared going into that. It's really everyone's there collaborating, sharing information. So we do actively encourage like our reps to give information, and I think that's a really good thing as well. Like our managers are not necessarily the best salespeople because they might have been out the game for a little bit of time, but having them and the reps like helping each other, lifting each other up. Like I think mentorship's a big one as well. We mentor everyone, junior reps to senior reps, and just give a different outlet of perspective when they've got a particular issue. So yeah, that is the coaching. Like we do scorecards, we do group settings as well.
Quick answer on this one. You said mentorship. Is that you are mentoring certain reps? Are there senior AEs tagged with junior AEs? How does that work?
Yeah, exactly that. So we look for people that have, and this is where it comes down to that gap analysis. Like we look where a gap of a potential AE is, and we look at another AE and say, this AE is brilliant at prospecting, an example, like building net new pipeline every single time, or multi-threading to get new people in. We would identify that and then we'll pair them up. And we also do that as well for anyone who's got like cross-regional teams. We do that on a cross-regional basis as well, just to ensure that they're, again, like we don't have unhealthy relations between two particular regions. Right. And that's worked really well.
Okay. No, that's extremely helpful. And Dave, going to you, similar question. So you have people that are under you that are managers that are coaching the reps. You obviously, from time to time, will get into the coaching if you need to. How are you gauging where you need to be coaching? I know that you mentioned weekly cadences, so that's probably part of what the coaching that you're doing. But how are you going about this?
Yeah, so we have this really interesting tool that we use called we called it the Cognism 17. It wasn't original thought. So someone could probably tell me. I think there was a book that someone read, and then like that got I don't know. But
that's how it always starts.
Someone from my network recommended it, and it's a great idea. But I can't not something that I can claim myself. But essentially, it's 17 different parts of the SDR role. And at the start of every month, each SDR is asked to rank themselves 1 to 5 against like each of those skills. There's there's stuff that is objective. So for example, the amount of dials that they made that for the month previous. It could be their squo rate, like the amount of meetings that are turning into squos, and those are really clearly benchmarked. But then there's some stuff that's really subjective. It's things like, how well do you know our enrichment use case, for example, or like marketing use case, or a sales use case, etc. Or what like your intro, like how does your intro stack up? And they grade themselves 1 to 5, and then the idea is the manager sits with them at the start of the month, and we'll go through those, and it's a really great way of identifying the focus areas for coaching, for one-to-one coaching for the rest of the month. And it's what we've seen is especially good about it is the fact that sometimes people feel like they've solved SDRing, or sales in general. I think like you've been in the role for a couple of years or whatever, you feel like you've solved it. So this is a really great way of pointing out like maybe there is literally only one thing that someone could be working on. But there is always one thing, and so that's kind of how we focus on like kind of the priorities in terms of coaching for an individual. And then if we see any themes within that, then obviously that really dictates the general coaching that we'll do to the team.
So you got the right reps on board. We have the coaching on board, and a lot of people are asking about this is the outbound strategy. Now, obviously, this is going to look different from the SDR and the AE perspective. But Dave, if we're going to come back to you real quick, you're coaching the reps on what they need to do skill wise and how they need to go about it. What are the things that you're teaching people in the outbound strategy? Let's go with like maybe 3 things. You're like, when you do outbound, these are things to do. I know you're probably going to mention how you're doing intro and cold calling, so we know that's going to be a part of it. But what are like the 3 go-tos that your reps have to be doing to be successful?
That's a very I don't know how I could summarize it in just 3. Okay, so very simply, I see outbound as like a funnel, or like SDRing as a funnel. So the first thing that every SDR has to do is they have to do the activity. Now, I think traditional sales leaders will really see the activity as a quantity metric. So like just do as much as physically possible. And then that's how everything will be solved if we just keep doing and doing and doing. And I agree that to a certain extent, we need to do more. But I see activity as really 3 things: do as much as possible, but do it in the right way. And when I say in the right way, I mean like you need to think about your overall approach. I'm a big believer in a multi-channel approach in general, but like we definitely have a weighting towards calling. We love like voice notes on LinkedIn as like a channel. So that's the how. And then the third thing would be the to who, and that's really like understanding your ICPs to make sure you're only reaching out in a perfect world. You're only reaching out to people within your ICP that are interested, etc., etc. When we first onboard reps, one of the most common mistakes is they start populating heads of sales engineering which is not really a job title that works, but it does make sense. So we need to make sure we're educating on ICP like from the start. And then once once the activity is happening, then really it's about the quality of activity. So that's the conversation. So it's like, do they understand like the way that we're really improving the quality of the conversations that our SDRs are having is we have a heavy focus on understanding what our prospects day-to-day is, and therefore what their pains, challenges, and goals might be. And then ultimately, like, then how we as a business solve them. And that's literally how we train it. We sit down and we say, look, like, okay, talk us through a head of sales. Like, tell us about what their day-to-day might be. What is their overall goal that is set for them by the business? What might be potential blockers, like what keeps them up at night, etc. And then fixing it from there. And then the third thing is and that, like ultimately, like that should obviously lead to meetings. And then the third thing is probably just like how we can make sure those meetings are turning up, and the handover process in general. So like we see massive fluctuations in attendance rate from when people first start to when they've been in the role for a while, and there's lots of factors that come into that. But like having a really tight process there, I think will probably be the third bit that's really important. If I was limited to only 3.
Yeah, you didn't like being limited to 3. You wanted to go crazy with it.
It's a very open-ended conversation.
No, it is. I mean, you could go to a lot of places, but I think the ways that you nail it down is important. How do you go about looking at it each quarter? And there might be the same, but how do you look at it each quarter when it comes to the channels that you prospect and the ICP you go after? And what I mean by that is, are you noticing, oh, well, we're getting more meetings with the CRO, so we need to double down, or we're starting to get more meetings on LinkedIn, guys, we need to change strategy? Like, how do you think about that?
It's a great question. So we definitely have a view on which we can see really clearly on the channels that are working. Every meeting that's booked, the SDRs will self-report where ultimately they feel like what channel they felt won us the meeting. So it's not absolutely perfect, but it's kind of I prefer that because, sometimes an SDR will spark up the conversation on LinkedIn, but then it'll switch to a call. And, for me, like, it's what sparks the conversation as opposed to what finishes the conversation. That's the channel that matters. So we have a really good view on that. I'll be honest, quarter on quarter, or every time I check, it's virtually the same. It's not changed for 4.5 years, really. So yeah, it's probably not something that I don't have a rigid structure, but I'm probably checking that like monthly. I kind of like definitely get a view on it. And then in terms of job titles, job titles is an interesting one, right? Because what we find for our particular product is especially as we've gone up market into enterprise, is that it's harder and harder for us to understand like what job titles actually matter, or like, sorry, not what matter. What we know is that there's a wide range of people that can be in charge of the contact data tool. Now, there's some overall themes that we know. We definitely have like more. We break into more accounts through sales than marketing, so we would start with sales. But yeah, like, again, it's something that we look at, but I think perhaps we could be doing more. Morgan, maybe you've told us part of the blueprint that's missing here.
Look, I'm just trying to uncover little gaps and just make it better, Dave. That's all. That's all I'm here for.
Good. Every day's a learning day. Tomorrow, I'm gonna get the RevOps team to stop everything they're doing to analyze our job title performance.
Yeah, they should. They're gonna love you for it. No, but that's great. I mean, that's the key, right? Is finding those angles, could be small, that can amplify the business. So now shifting over to John here, there's a couple of.
Can I just add one thing on? Because obviously, like, I think a lot of this is about like what myself and John have seen over the years, and maybe John, you're about to completely disagree with me on this, but I think that I know from speaking to a lot of companies that come and ask me for loads of advice, I think that there are some companies that are like try and be so aggressively data driven about sales that it actually becomes a disadvantage to them. Now, we have a fantastic RevOps team. They deliver us really great data, but there is to sales, there's a huge human side. And one thing John mentioned earlier is this collaboration piece, and just sitting down, the AEs and getting them to like, talk to each other about what best practices and things like that, and how that's shifting. And I think having that culture is often like way more important than having like exactly the, like trying to work out exactly the data, because I think it can tell you the wrong things often, right? And not paint the perfect picture. It could just be, I spent 3 months working on attendance rates, my SDR team's attendance rates, and although I just mentioned it being really important,
Yep.
I was surprised when ops presented me some data that showed that it was wrong. Oh, sorry, that showed that it was low. But then after 3 months, where I didn't see an improvement, I looked into the report, and the way that they'd built the data was there was an error in it. And so I was doing all this work on this data piece when actually like there wasn't a problem is what I'm saying, right? And that like, so I think for everybody, like really finding that balance between the human side and the data side is also like incredibly important. Yeah, definitely not taking anything away from the data, but like, I think some people can be too focused on that side of things when it comes to what is a really human job, right, in sales.
No, I think that's actually a great point. Analyzing the data within the data, right? Which is absolutely critical, which leads to this question that's got put up here. And then also someone asked a question on, does Cognism tool typically replace or does it supplement, enhance? I know y'all can tackle that one, but let's get to this one first, which is, hey, I have a huge sales team of one, an account executive. So Outbound for me has to be totally scalable and automated via marketing. Any ideas that usually work well? So John, if you want to tackle that.
I'm a big component. Like, the best channel is always going to be the phone. Like, if you've got an AE, like, get them on the phone to contact and call people. Like, I get what you're saying. There has to be volume coming through, but I think it really depends on the segment you're targeting. If you're targeting enterprise, like, that is not going to work. I think personalization is absolutely key at the moment in breaking into these accounts. I think a good example, our CEO's been harping on this, so I'm sure you've seen it somewhere, but like the Zoom CRO or a C-suite individual, CFO. So they will not have a conversation today unless you're getting information from her team on what the actual implication and pain is on the ground for the reps, and then you go to her with that information. Like, I don't think that if you're targeting enterprise accounts, that having a unpersonalized approach via like a LinkedIn bot is going to break into these accounts. All you're going to get is happy ears people that don't want to do their job and just love going on demos all the time. If you want to break into the true accounts where people actually want to buy, you need to go in with some pain. So I'd say like big component, pick up the phone, talk to people, get some insight, and then go out. And more really quick, just on Dave's previous point, I think that's really, for me, the biggest learning is like when you're very early, that revenue's revenue, right? You just need to get revenue on the board. Like that's the most important thing. You need to hit this number to grow, to hit your Series A, hit your Series B if you're venture backed, right? When you get to like a B or C, there's a distinction then between good revenue and bad revenue. And that's really where this ABM strategy comes into play, bringing in good fit accounts. Because what's going to happen if you don't bring in good revenue at the point of like a Series B, you're going to get a very, very leaky bucket, and the customers that you're bringing on are inevitably going to churn. And your numbers are still going to be, you still need to hit 100% year-on-year growth or 80% year-on-year growth. All it's doing is going to put so much pressure on your sales team to counteract that leaky bucket. So I fully agree with Dave. Like, data is very important that you monitor it, but when you're very, very early, it's just getting companies in. So you're actually building a catalog of data so that you can actually make good decisions. And if you don't have those customers in initially to begin with, you're never going to be able to make good data decisions. And we were very spray and pray when we started. Like we brought in an abundance of customers, like some really bad fits, some really good fits, but you don't know what's good and bad unless you actually bring them in as a customer initially.
Dave, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to tell a story of how John, as an AE back in 2018, was being told to take time out of his day to literally, someone would be like, oh, maybe we should target events. And then John would just have to go and pull a list of people from events companies and just upload it himself manually to Salesforce so that the SDRs could go and tackle it. And that's really like, just reinforcing that spray and pray approach. But it was all based on that wasn't a data driven decision. That was based on like, oh, we've had a couple of good conversations in events. Let's try it out harder and see what happens. Yeah.
And it works, right? Like, I think the key thing here is when you find something that works and it's sticky and you know that you can sign, especially early, and you know that you can sign these customers. My old manager used to say it was like 70-30, like 70% once you find a fit, double down on that. The 30% you then iterate and you try and find new avenues, because you are going to exhaust that little finite ICP initially. And then you just keep iterating on that until you can actually kind of scale out.
No, I think that's a great approach. And then that leads into just some other, we're talking about the tech pieces, but here's some just other tech stack best practices. John, I don't know if you want to speak to this, or Dave, real quick. Like, out of these techs, I mean, obviously Cognism is helping you out on the data back end, but anything else here that like you're like, oh, okay, like this tool's been massive for us, and here's why?
Maybe this is the moment that we answer Josh Adams's question in the chat. So
help out Josh.
Yeah, so Josh, Cognism isn't a CRM. We see ourselves as the fuel for CRM. We provide contact data for the prospects that will be in your CRM. So we're Salesforce users. We obviously use Cognism to pull in that data. And I think like me and John will be aligned. We're biased, but we'll be aligned that those are the two most important pieces of equipment in our tool set. I think for me, probably the most important tool outside of that, especially considering I run the SDR team, is outreach. I think it's really important to have. We essentially use outreach as like our playbook for the SDRs. We build sequences for them. They then know which, depending on which what the situation is, they'll put the prospect into one of those cadences, and then they basically just have to follow the flow, right? And so it's really just giving them that playbook. I think some people are using outreach for their SDR teams to automate as much as possible. I'm starting to we virtually have, I think we have virtually zero automated emails going out nowadays, or automated messages at all. So we're not using outreach for the automation. We're really using it for the playbook, right? Like to that's where we write our playbook for the reps, and that's the way I see it. So outreach would definitely be the most important to me, but everything else listed is super valuable as well. I don't know whether, John, you've got a view.
Yeah, I was going to say, out of the list percentages here, I think Gong's probably my favorite one. I think like actually getting into the nitty-gritty, not relying on hearsay, and actually being able to dig into the individual calls. And I think the way the AI is like developing in terms of like what's the correct word for it? Like speech, like transferring the speech into text. What's the word for that, Morgan? I think on the spot.
Transcripts.
Yeah, there we go. Transcript. That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to think. Yes, the transcript element is absolutely superb, and I think it's really, really good from an AE perspective, like being able to identify deals that have at risk, giving you a top level overview of your pipeline. Like the way they're moving the product is very, very good for AE pipeline management. So I say that's probably my favorite. But I think irrespective of the softwares aren't talking to each other. Like that's the key thing here. Like don't just buy an abundance of software. Like it needs to all integrate into the same tech stack. There needs to be adoption. Adoption is the biggest thing when you buy these technologies. There's no adoption. You can do the best thing in the world, but the team's not using it. They don't see the value. No point having it. So I think these 4 are ones that we've got quite implemented, adopted, integrated into Salesforce, and they have a place in a salesperson's day-to-day. And I think that's really the key thing when you buy software is like, this is the salesperson's day-to-day. Where does it fit into that? Or what is it going to replace? And that's the kind of way that we do our tech stack.
I think one other thing to add here is a lot of solutions. We see a lot of solutions moving to try and be all-in-ones. And I think one thing Cognism has always done is we've not been cheap when it comes to our like tech stack for our sales team. Cognism made the decision to get Salesforce, which is obviously the most expensive CRM in the market. When, John, we must have had about 3 salespeople. When easily we could have gone on Pipedrive or I don't know, like a Zoho type tool.
Yeah.
And we've always heavily invested, and I think there's a lot of narrative at the moment around consolidation of tech stack, but for us, okay, it's great if there's an all-in-one solution that is genuinely the best in class at each bit, fantastic. But I would, as long as they're talking to each other, just like John mentioned, I'd rather have the best in class solution in each area than just have one on the same have 2 average solutions but on the same platform. And I think that's what we see in our tech stack today.
No, I think those are awesome breakdowns. And there's a question that just came in here, and we will touch it real quick. We're going to go to forecasting. So, John, we're going to tee you up for that. But here, helpful information related to the overall core tech stack. Thinking about this, does this apply to sales, business development, professional services, consulting, and advisory services? Or do you think it strictly applies to SaaS products? So really going over that tech stack again. I would say it applies to, it's contextual, but I think a lot of them do apply to all places. It just depends how you're using it. But obviously, you all let us know what you think.
Yeah, I think, personally, I think it doesn't matter, right? Like, I think SaaS has been, SaaS and the tech scene has been the first to adopt some of these amazing technologies that have come, these amazing SaaS products that have come. I think a lot of that is because, we're a SaaS product, so we know the value of other SaaS products, but other industries are perhaps lagging behind. But if you're in one of those industries, I would highly recommend giving some of these tools a go and like really focusing on the tech stack, because it might be a massive edge. We have a DAC team. We have an office based out in Germany. There's a lot of kind of older manufacturing companies in that economy, and we're seeing already that a lot of these companies are really focused on digital transformation at the moment, because they're realizing that they're still that some of their methods are outdated, and they're seeing a lot of value very quickly. So that would be my view. John, I don't know whether there's anything you want to add.
No, I was going to say, like, exactly as Dave said, I think it's very transferable. I think SaaS has always been like the first to adopt. But yeah, I think it's, for example, like looking into particular things like lead routing and stuff like that, like that's really what Chili Piper does. Like that, irrespective of industry that you serve, you probably want certain deals going to certain reps that have a higher close rate or sit in a particular industry vertical. So like there's definitely software that's relatable to any industry. It's completely agnostic. I suppose like stuff like Gong, which is, I would say, more done like web recordings like this, like over internet calls and closing remotely. Gong's probably transferable. Is it probably face-to-face engagement? Probably not. So like elements like that are something to take into account when you review these technologies.
No, I think those are all great answers there. We have about 10 minutes, so we're gonna quickly go to these questions follow up that you'll have. Craig, we'll answer Craig's question and then we'll wrap up on these last 2 points. The question here is: we're about to go to a strategy session for our SME SaaS provider. How do you guys go about setting ICPs, and what's the steps you go through to think about how to target them? So if someone wants to answer that, we'll go through these last 2 slides and then answer the quick questions, and we'll be out of here for today.
Yeah, I think the key LinkedIn sales insights. Well, can you hear me okay? Well,
Yo, you're good. You win it. You're good now. You're good.
Yeah, so we use LinkedIn sales insights. So what we do there is we look to gather as much information. So technographic data is probably one of the key drivers here. So of the available accounts that we can sell to, and this is really when you get very strategic in your outbound, like you've only got 5 reps, right? And you've got 1 million accounts that you can service. Of those 1 million accounts, which ones are going to have the highest ACV, the highest win rate, and the quickest to sell? That's really where you use your technographic data to come into play. So look at stuff like what technology stack they've got, what particular job titles are sitting in those accounts. And a lot of that information you're going to get is coming from your existing customer base. And that's really like replicating your best fit customers, finding those in that available TAM, and then giving them to your reps. That's the way that we do it. And everything is, as we discussed earlier, like account based. So work out on what segment they're working in, what's the maximum number of accounts that a rep can service in that segment. If it's commercial or SMB, they can probably hold a lot more than your enterprise and strategic reps. So think about like how the dynamics of the team work and what structures you put in place. But yeah, setting ICPs, look at your customer base, like what your high performing customers, replicate them.
Yeah, and I think in terms of targeting them, like to be honest, a lot of it comes down to trial and error. We tried the phone, we've tried emails, we've tried LinkedIn. When we see something, we see a new channel like evolve, like we've seen it online, we'll try it out and give it a go and see if it works, and then if it does, we double down on it. I think one of the key things for any leaders is really giving your sales team giving them the playbooks and the enablement and training to show them like, okay, this is what's working today, but also within that structure, allowing them some flexibility to explore these new options. And what you'll see is like naturally people will kind of go and explore new ideas, and then you should see it in the data that's doing well, and then you double down on that. And that's obviously true of channels, but it's also true of like the messaging that is being sent. Or I think like John mentioned it earlier, but we're finding a lot of success with a bottom-up approach today. And I think that kind of naturally evolved from the team trying it out and seeing the success, and now that is a very heavy piece of our playbook overall.
Awesome. Hopefully that helped answer the question. Craig, let us know if we need more clarification there. As we have about like 5 minutes left, quickly, John, tell us about how do you look at forecasting? We were talking about obviously filling the pipeline. We were talking about coaching, but obviously you have to forecast appropriately. So what are you doing uniquely at Cognism with the team, and what are some actual insights that people could take away so they can start doing this with their teams?
Yeah, sweet. I'll try and be pretty quick on this because I know we've got a few slides to go through. So so how we do forecasting, I think there's gut, and then there's also like the statistical maths element that comes into it, and they both have a part to play in this. So I think the methodology that you roll out, so for example, like a med pick or something like that, that really defines and vets the quality of the pipeline. So are they meeting this criteria? Have they got the right components for the stage of the sales cycle that they're at? That's really what your managers should be like vetting in their pipeline reviews. And really questioning the rep on the ACV, the close date, have they got the right people involved, what gaps are missing in that. If you've got a regimented process like that, like that's a really, really good way to ensure that forecasting is accurate. And rep managers do this on a weekly basis with the reps, dissect every single deal that they're working, validate it, check it. And then the manager's very, very confident in the forecast that they can pull from the reps when the reps submit their own individual forecasts. So that's one way we look at it, is kind of rep-led, manager-led, they submit their own. Then we have the other variants of that, which is kind of AI-led, like technology-led. So we use a company called Cluster that looks at all our statistical data, looks at past win rates, of pipeline, our commit, our best case, and it will spit out a number that says what we're likely to land on for the month and the quarter, using a variation of the two. And if you've got a very, very good sales team and you're following your methodology correct, like they should land around a similar number. And if they're really off, then there's a big disconnect, right? Like your reps have either got happy ears or they're very they're under committing what's likely to come in. So I think having a basis of the both is like a really good balance. But one thing that's really important, something we're working on now, which we've been advised to do, is like look at pivotal points in your sales cycle. So for us, a pivotal point is like our validation. So when we run a trial, really spend time on that and have like a gateway, and make sure that everything's correct before they move on to the next point of the sales cycle. And if you do that and create like 2 or 3 like pivotal events that take place in your sale, have the manager spend a lot of time with the reps on that. That just ensures that the pipeline that they're building is actually quality pipeline. But yeah, forecasting it is rep-led and then kind of AI-led, and then we find the balance between the two.
Awesome. I like how you're using the AI in there, not as like the North Star, but as a complement to what you're doing as a whole. And so hopefully that was insightful. I know someone mentioned forecasting. They want to dive into that. Now, again, as we have about 3 minutes left here, if you both want to quickly talk about your best practice when it comes to commission plans, if anyone has a question that's like a quick hit, let us know in the chat. But this is what we're going to wrap up on as we get out of here.
Yeah, so on the SDR side with commission plans, the one thing that me and John are both pretty aligned on is we try and pay our SDRs on objective things, and for us that is meetings attended. So we give them books of business, they're clear on our ICP, and they just have to get people into conversation with our AEs, and if they do that, then the box is ticked and they get paid. And then we actually give them a kicker on close one revenue, because again, that's objective. It's either closed or it's not. They've either signed the contract or not. I know a lot of SDR teams that are, or we actually had an old model where we did an SQO system. It was based off of ANT and authority needing time. We found that A's would judge authority needing time very differently, and that would create, to be honest, like a lot of animosity. And we, us leaders were spending most of our time like dealing with disputes within that as opposed to anything else. So we moved away from that. We really want to keep it as objective as possible. I think there is a place for an SQO type system or a SAL type system, but my advice would be to try and keep it, make SALs be judged on very objective measures if you can. So, for example, like what CRM they use, one of the criteria could be, if they use Salesforce, then it's a SAL, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we think about our commission plans for SDRs.
Quick question here. The boxes tick when the AE starts talking to the SQL, or it's ticked if the AE accepts it?
So we done it based on, when we've done SQOs, like we done it based on BANT, so budget, authority, need time. When it met that criteria is when it moved up. Today we do it, we still have a SQO system, but the reps aren't actually quoted on it. It's really just a back-end reporting that we know that there's a consistency. So we do that when it hits like a validation. So when we're running a trial, that's when it would be an SQO or SQL. Morgan, I was going to say like one thing that was really, really, I absolutely love this quote the other day. Someone shared this, an actual commission software company called Cobra shared it. But I really love the quote. It was like, whether you're a CEO or VP of sales, the sales compensation plan is probably the most powerful tool you have. And I've actually seen that like firsthand. Like when really, really good story. I've done a LinkedIn post on this. Like one of the key of drivers for the business was like trying to get to multi-year contracts and get them consistently sold. Like, guess how we achieved that? Like, we doubled this in the space of 3 months. Like, we paid the sales guys on it. Like, we changed the commission plan to give them more money, give them accelerators when they done that, and it instantly changed their behavior. So I think it really goes back to Dave's point. Like, think about your business and what objectives you want to drive, and make sure that your sales guys are paid on that, and you're paying them additional stuff on that, and then you will absolutely get the output that you want on the back of that.
I love that. It's great. It's a great quote. I think that a lot of people don't think about it in that way, but I think it's the best way to think about it, right? Incentivize your people and you all will be incentivized, right? So it just makes a ton of sense. As we wrap up here, we're right on time. Any lasting thoughts that y'all want to give to the audience on what to do? And appreciate everybody hanging in here. Hopefully you got something helpful out of this and it was great insight, but anything y'all want to leave on a note, and where can people find you if they do have questions?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the key thing for me is as we've gone through this scale, like, I think really there's numbers and then there's people, and the people drive the numbers, and like making sure that you've got your strong people and they're developing and they're staying in the business. Like, if you lose some of your top performers, that can stifle growth for such a long period of time, and it's really difficult to replace those people. So like, really spend time with your team, make sure that they feel value and there's development paths for them. And that's really the reason why we've been very successful, is we've kept a lot of our highest performers in the organization for a long period of time. They're built on very specialist market knowledge that our competitors just can't compete with. And we come across as experts when we speak about like data in particular.
Love it. Dave, anything you want to end on?
Totally back that. We have a lot of fun. That's what helps us keep people, right? Like we really balance things, and we have a fantastic CEO who's taught us to like really reward our people for the good work that they do, and not, again, like, we're not cheap when it comes to me and John were fortunate enough to just do an all expenses paid for President's Club, like to Croatia, like, long weekend, and we had like 30 of our salespeople on that. And I know lots of companies doing President's Club, that's fantastic, but when we first started, he took the whole company away for a whole weekend and things like that. So the numbers are the numbers, but like, again, I'm just going to echo John, because I think it's so important that you've got keep your people happy, and I think and if you've hired the right people and you're keeping them happy, then the rest will just fall into place.
Love that. Well, John, Dave, thanks for taking your time here today. Hopefully, again, everyone found this to be insightful, and we'll see you on the next one, and y'all have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.